Hello and welcome to Drive at the DW Car Show. Coming up, a bullet on wheels with secret agent mystique, the Aston Martin DB11. Gasoline and electricity strike the right balance, the Toyota Prius. And the BMW 5 Series Touring. Car tester Emanuel Schaefer notes that the station wagon version of BMW's 5 Series has been around for 25 years now, and this is the 5th generation. The designers first revamped the sedan, then the touring car. We're testing the 530 with a 195 kilowatt diesel engine. It launches from 0 to 100 in 5.8 seconds. BMW says it consumes 5.1 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers. The fronts of the touring car and the sedan are identical. Both speak the new BMW design language. Visually, the kidney-shaped radiator grills and the headlights are a single unit. One of the station wagon's innovations is the stub axle, which allows a flat cargo floor. It also widens the cargo area and increases the maximum cargo weight to 720 kilograms. Emanuel says many customers choose the 5 touring car over other station wagons in its segment because of its 2-part hatch. That hasn't changed in the 5th generation, so you can open the top of the tailgate and drop in your shopping bags. Easy. So no having to heave up the weight of the whole tailgate or wait for it to open electronically. The standard pneumatic suspension smooths the ride on uneven roadways, and the revised station wagon cuts a good figure overall on country roads. But how does it perform on the highway? The 5 Series touring car is often used for long trips or vacations, says Emanuel, and BMW had that in mind when looking for things to improve. First was driver comfort. BMW took a look at the suspension and decided to replace some parts with lighter ones. And then there's the noise level in the interior. BMW added more insulation without adding much weight. Emanuel thinks the results are convincing. This generation of the 5 station wagon is noticeably quieter than its predecessor. That makes driving more pleasant, even at high speeds. You can drive several hundred kilometers without having your head throb from all the noise when you get out of the car at the end of your journey. There's another thing Emanuel likes. You know how when you set off on a winter morning and it's cold in the car and your hands get cold? But who wants to wear gloves in the car? Of course, many manufacturers have steering wheel heating. But where do they put the control? You often spend a long time looking for it. Sometimes it's on the right of the central console. Sometimes on the left below the steering wheel. Sometimes somewhere else. BMW put the button in the logical place, in the lower middle of the steering wheel. Just turn it on and your hands warm up. A simple solution, but you have to think of it first. That's practical for people who often drive different vehicles. Plus, you don't have to take your eyes off the road to turn the heating on or off. Emanuel says BMW has made lots of little improvements to the 5 Series station wagon. It still isn't the top of its segment for trunk volume, but it does hold more than its predecessor. The 530D version he tested starts at just under 58,000 euros in Germany. Electric cars and plug-in hybrids are all the rage at the moment, but the Toyota Prius, the grandfather of them all, has been out on the road for around 20 years now. The Japanese car maker has regularly updated the technology, of course. The current model being sold in showrooms is the vehicle's 4th generation. Car tester Ines Petri explains that the latest Prius comes in a full hybrid or plug-in version. The latter is more for people who can run a cable to the car at home. In the full hybrid, on the other hand, batteries are charged by the gasoline engine out on the road or by recovering energy during braking and engine braking, she says. Ines is taking out the full hybrid, self-charging variant of the Prius. Its power is provided by a 1.8-liter gasoline engine and an electric motor that can also work independently of its internal combustion counterpart. A secondary electric motor converts power from the gas engine into electrical energy stored in the batteries. Altogether, the system puts out 90 kilowatts of power. The Prius can hit 100 kilometers an hour from a standstill in 10.6 seconds and has a top speed of 180. Toyota says it burns just 3.3 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers. Ines says that over the years, Toyota has managed to make the hybrid feel more and more like a standard internal combustion engine car. Drivers can choose different driving modes, among them environmentally friendly eco mode, a normal mode, and a power mode for when you want a little more juice. The latter really gives the car a lot of zip. There's also a purely electric mode for when the car is traveling at low speeds. However, the full hybrid only manages that trick for around 2 kilometers. And that's the decisive difference between it and the plug-in version. The plug-in has larger batteries that give it a range in electric mode of about 50 kilometers. This variant is also 11 centimeters longer, but because the technology takes up more space, Prius plug-ins have 140 liters less volume in the trunk. A 2-part hatch has also been a character trait in the model for the last 2 generations. The interior is a study in contrasts and anything but boring. The dashboard display is narrow and sleek. A lot of the important data appears on a high-tech central console. The shifter also has a futuristic look and feel. All these polished surfaces contribute to the car's modern look, says Ines, but they can also start to look dusty pretty quickly. That's why she would recommend always carrying a feather duster on board. Just a swipe and everything gleams again. The displays also make a very modern impression, especially the one up here on the dashboard, which lets you know what's going on in the car all the time. Another modern touch, an induction plate for charging your smartphone without having to plug it in. The most antiquated feature is the parking brake in the footwell. Ines says electric and plug-in hybrid cars are really taking off. But for her, a full hybrid vehicle like this one still has a place, even though its range is much more restricted than a plug-in. That's because not everyone has access to charging cables at home, or just doesn't want the bother with cables all the time. In general, she thinks a key moment for the sector will come when the batteries can be charged through induction, and you can dispense with cables altogether. Following the A3 and A4, Audi has rolled out a Gtron version A5, a bivalent model that runs mainly on natural gas, but also uses gasoline. Audi's power-to-gas initiative helps make the Gtron models greener than ever. The car maker is producing its own gas from plant biomass and feeding it into the natural gas network. Peugeot has given its 308 GTI a facelift and improved technology. Outside, the front and rear have been redone and the entire car set lower. Inside, bucket seats and a new steering wheel stress the car's sporty side. It leaves from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in just 6 seconds. It starts at around 35,000 euros in Germany. Car tester Reinhold Deisenhofer says even James Bond doesn't get a new company car every day. And the Aston Martin DB11's predecessor, the DB9, showed it. Its platform was developed for the Vanquish back in 2001, and its motorization was even older, from the era when Aston Martin belonged to Ford. In the meantime, Daimler has bought into the British car maker, and that's fine if you consider the current AMG GT models. Let's see what the DB11 can do, he says. The official successor to the DB9 is impressive at first sight, and not just when it's sunny. The DB11 is classically elegant, with proverbial British understatement. Its design language will be the basis for all future Aston Martin models. No sills or spoilers. Out of consideration for the neighbors, the car is even programmed for a silent start. For the first few meters, the noise flaps in the exhaust remain closed, but later, watch out. Then the engine roars from all 12 cylinders. This gentleman race car churns out 447 kilowatts and takes just 3.9 seconds to rocket to 100 kilometers an hour. Its 700 newton meters of torque and top speed of 322 kilometers an hour promise fantastic, if eccentric, driving fun. Reinhold says the Aston Martin Gran Turismo's interior is classical. The perfect bucket seats and leather seating make you go, ah, when you sit down. And the instruments are very reduced. The central console has 5 buttons made of real glass. The middle one, the ignition, is surrounded by those controlling the 8-speed automatic transmission. Reinhold is especially taken with the precise steering. The only thing he can find to criticize is that there are too few surfaces to store things. The cooperation between Mercedes and Aston Martin has paid off. The interior feels more modern than in the DB11's predecessors. New are the 12-inch infotainment and digital instruments, but the model hasn't lost any of its British charm. There's top-quality leather wherever you look. The British end of the partnership gets all the credit for the DB11's handling. The car is much faster and more agile than you'd imagine at first sight. Overall, it seems very different from its competitors. There's none of that Ferrari melodrama or gut-wrenching Lamborghini roar. And the DB11, even very high speeds seem routine. Reinhold says the DB11 definitely has the James Bond feel of an Aston Martin. It's a lovely GT with the performance of a super sports car and the elegance of a timeless icon. But even when driving at moderate speeds, fuel consumption never dropped below 14 liters per 100 kilometers. He tells us the DB stands for David Brown, who bought the Aston Martin company in 1947. In 1963, the DB5 became the first James Bond car and served in the films Goldfinger and Thunderball. For over 20 years, the imposing Grand Cherokee has been U.S. carmaker Jeep's flagship model. Including mirrors, it's 2 meters .16 wide. On German roads, it looks and feels pretty oversized. Car tester Michelle Assenmacher says that for Europe, the Grand Cherokee has lots of space, comfort, and size. In short, it's a real American. True to the slogan, "Big is beautiful," the Jeep sticks out in traffic, not least because it's 1.8 meters tall. A special version released in honor of the carmaker's 75th birthday sports bronze-colored decorative elements. 20-inch light alloy rims emphasize the brawny appearance. A 3-liter diesel motor sends the Grand Cherokee hurtling down the road. The back offers 782 liters of cargo space over a flat surface. With strategically placed real wood appliques, the interior is pretty elegant. A wheelbase of nearly 3 meters translates into lots of room for passengers and cargo. Michelle likes the interior a lot, especially the decorative trim on the dash, which continues onto the door. But she thinks the controls are pretty crude and simple and don't fit with the Jeep's imposing appearance. Characteristic design elements like the brand's trademark grille with 7 air intakes make the Grand Cherokee look like a monster of the road. That impression is emphasized by the vehicle's chunky, massive body design. It looks pretty slow. Is it? Michelle says that despite its 2.5 tons, the Jeep's V6 diesel engine makes it nimble and quick. Its power is nothing to sneeze at, 184 kilowatts, and it can hit 100 kilometers an hour in just over 8 seconds. Jeep says the Grand Cherokee burns 7 liters of fuel over 100 kilometers, but in our test it guzzled over 10 liters in that distance. The Jeep reminds Michelle more of a ship than a car because its soft suspension gets you swaying in curves or over bumps. But that's exactly what makes it a great car for longer road trips, she says. Which brings us back to customers for this most American of cars. Longer travel distances in the U.S. make the Jeep's comfort factor appealing there. Michelle says in German traffic she feels more like she's driving a truck than a car because she's sitting so high she can practically wave at them. But that makes it harder to track smaller cars around you. That isn't stopping customers in Europe from buying it. The Grand Cherokee is popular here, even 20 years after its launch. Today, car tester Christoph Bauer is introducing us to a VW sports car that never got the respect it deserved, the Corrado G60. The Scirocco secured Volkswagen's place in the segment of affordable sports compact coupes. The Corrado was conceived as its successor. Company strategists were demanding lower fuel consumption and greater comfort at a more affordable price. In other words, better but cheaper. The response was to keep making the Scirocco and aim the Corrado at the premium end of the sector. As Christoph tells it, Volkswagen's development team got to work on a new sports car in the mid-1980s under the project name Typhoon, harking back to the wind theme behind names like Scirocco and Passat. Eventually, they realized the image of the Typhoon as a destructive natural force wasn't ideal, so the PR department took the Spanish verb correr, meaning run, and morphed it into Corrado. By 1988, he says, they had VW's new sports compact ready for series production. A TV ad introduced the Corrado as Volkswagen's first real sports car. The new model's interior was adapted partly from the new Passat 3, while much of the platform technology was taken from the second-generation VW Golf. The modular design ensured high quality while keeping assembly costs down. The ad says the Corrado by Volkswagen. This is how we imagine a sports car. Christoph explains the VW added a few technological highlights into the Corrado mix, hoping to create a marketing image of the Corrado as a high-tech vehicle. It boasted the most powerful engine in VW's history, with 1.8 liters, 4 cylinders, and a G-ladder supercharger putting out 160 horsepower. And to keep all 4 wheels on the ground, it was graced with a retractable rear spoiler, like the new Porsche 911. So the fastest way to draw admiring glances was to drive up to the village disco in a Corrado G60. But Christoph isn't sure that was the precise image VW was aiming for. Listing at 42,500 Deutschmarks, the VW Corrado cost about as much as a 5 Series Beamer or a Mercedes E-Class, out of reach for most of its young target buyers. When purchased secondhand, many Corrados were chewed up by tuners and customizers, widened, lowered, and souped up. Christoph doesn't think the new Corrado G60 needed any of that. A car reviewer once wrote, between 1,500 and 6,300 revs, it moves ahead at near relentless speed. This was mainly because the G-ladder scroll-type supercharger gave the car plenty of pickup at lower rev bands. It leaped from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 8.3 seconds, topping out at 225. Incredibly fast for a front-wheel drive at that time. If Christoph blatantly overdoes it, the car might understeer a little, but he just has to ease off the gas to get it back on track in the curves. He's having fun. Christoph knows that at the time, VW's marketing department was very proud of the new rear spoiler concept. It extends automatically when the speed hits 120 kilometers per hour. And when you drive down to the ice cream parlor and want to flaunt it a little, you can put it up manually. But in other respects, the Corrado's look reflects many elements of VW's design language in the 1990s. Clear lines, smooth surfaces, and rounded corners. A little boring, in Christoph's view. Optically, he definitely wouldn't call it a milestone. The compact VW Corrado made up for its pedestrian design with extra practicality. The big hatchback allowed easy access to the spacious cargo space. The rear seats accommodated 2 adult passengers, and the generous standard equipment package was unmatched at the time, with ABS, power steering, sport seats, thermal insulated glass, and heated wing mirrors. A highlight for Christoph is this red G60 emblem, indicating the legendary G-ladder supercharger under the hood. It's a belt-driven compressor that creates higher gauge pressure even at low revs and provides a steady increase in thrust without the infamous turbo lag. The major downside, says Christoph, is that if you floor it with the oil temperature too low or after a do-it-yourself tuning, it can total the G-ladder. One reviewer wrote at the time that it's a lot of fun to drive, but takes a toll on your nerves. The turbocharged 1.8-liter 4-cylinder engine puts out a very respectable 160 horsepower. In the late 1980s, that was enough to keep up with most Porsches. Christoph tells us that VW was very proud of its new showcase car, but it didn't achieve the hoped-for market success, even if the practical 4-cylinder aspirated engines and somewhat more impressive VR6 would have satisfied most demands. Only about 97,000 Corrados were ever built, way too few by VW standards. In the end, the Corrado's high price were its doom, but not before it had set new benchmarks as a practical, high-quality sports car with robust standard technology that was nearly unparalleled at the time. Christoph winds up by saying Volkswagen might not have earned much cash off the Corrado, but the boost to the image of a brand seen as boring and utilitarian was invaluable. The Corrado showed the world that VW could be more, and compact high-performance vehicles became a fixture of the manufacturer's model range. Special features like the G-ladder and the automatic rear spoiler keep the Corrado on classic car fan radar even now. He says it was definitely a milestone in automotive history. But a long time would pass before the Corrado had an official successor. 12 years to be exact. In 2008, Volkswagen finally rolled out another sports coupe in the Corrado spirit. But they decided to call it the new Scirocco. And next time on Drive It, from 0 to 100 in 3.4 seconds, the Porsche 911 GT3. And a high-end hybrid crossover SUV, the Lexus NX 300H.